Good afternoon and welcome to our Hāpara webinar series. We've taken a break from doing these for a couple of months, and so I'm excited that we get to start back up, and even more excited to be with the people that we get to have a conversation with today, because Kim and Erin are, we were joking, they're anywhere from, I don't know, 20 minutes to 3 hours away from me. I'm in Chicago and you guys are in Joliet School District 86. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
We also have Beth Stills, who's one of our engagement managers at Hāpara, professional learning extraordinaire, former user of Hāpara. So Beth, thank you for joining us as well. Beth, you were a part of successfully rolling out Hāpara at Joliet, correct?
Yes, I was. They were I don't tell anybody, they might have been my favorite rollout ever. So,
well, maybe some of your other customers and our other customers will be on this, so they feel free to send in questions and that sort of thing, and give Beth a hard time if you were not in fact her favorite in this.
Yeah, you can compete for being, second in line here.
I love it. Kim, you're the coordinator of Instructional Technology, and Erin, you are the Instructional Tech Coach, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Now, tell me a little bit. Now, you guys made the decision to, I think you moved over and started piloting with us almost a year, actually probably about a year ago now, correct?
Correct. I was thinking it was longer than that, but yes, it was about a year ago.
Well, we've gotten a lot, you guys have gotten a ton done in the last year. So before we jump into kind of talking about your implementation and your rollout, what's the situation in your school district right now? You guys are you totally virtual? How has COVID hit your school district? What are some of the challenges you're facing?
So we are completely remote right now. We have been since the start, since last spring. So, we didn't have actually Hāpara going at the beginning of the year. We kind of held off because we wanted to make sure we knew exactly how it would function remotely, because we had not done that before, and we wanted to make sure things were in line for that, to do that correctly. And I'll tell you what, when we introduced that, what was it, I think in October we were ready to roll that out, and the teachers were thrilled. They were so happy, and it was a game changer, honestly, for remote teaching, for them to have that view of the students and what they're doing on their screens. And it just they welcomed it with open arms again, and they were very, very excited to have it back. So that's where we're at.
Wonderful. Now, Beth, you were talking before we even got on this call about how this was the best rollout that you were a part of, and them being your favorite client again. But I was curious, can you talk to me a little bit from the perspective of Hāpara? Like, what did you do, and kind of what were the asks that helped set up the implementation on the part of Joliet?
Well, I didn't actually do any of that. I mean, it was, I sent some resources out, which is what I always do, is we send, just some professional learning resources and some videos and some websites to take a look at. And they took those resources and they ran with that with their team. And, unbeknownst to me, when we got on our professional learning call, for me to go through those resources and talk a little bit about that, they're like, oh, we've already done all that, Beth. We know what we're doing. We've practiced and we've gone through all the tutorials and we have all this down. What we want to do is spend this time asking you some questions. We have you here for an hour and we have a list of questions that's going to take up that time. So we spent really that session together just going through some of the different scenarios that they wanted to kind of put in front of me that I could go through that maybe weren't addressed in some of those training resources. So I think I've always said that they have the secret sauce. And I think what really the secret was they wrapped their heads around it. They knew Hāpara inside and out really before they came to that meeting. And that made all the difference in the world, because they were able to get those questions addressed that really aren't addressed anywhere else because they were so unique to them.
Kim and Erin, I mean, we don't get a lot of customers who have that secret sauce, or who come ready to go and are prepared. Talk to us a bit about your process. Why, how did you prepare ahead of time, and what was the lead up?
Well, I think we introduced Hāpara mid-year because we were using another tool that was getting phased out, and we knew the teachers were used now to having that kind of tool in the classroom. So We knew we were going to introduce it in January when they came back from Christmas break. So we sent out a document kind of just introducing Hāpara, what it is, the short video that Beth shared with us, we shared with teachers just to give them a sneak peek of what's coming when they get back in January. And then, said there are 3 components. Here they are. Don't overwhelm yourselves. We're going to focus on highlights first. That's the main component to look at. And then we gave them some short snippets about Hāpara, but then did include the 45-minute webinar that Beth shared with us for those teachers that really did want to take a deeper dive over Christmas break and learn it on their own. And to Beth's point too, I think we kind of have 2 phases, and this is what we do. I think I've seen this a lot with our team. The coaches get their hands on a tool and they pick it apart and they look at it from every single angle and test things out and what if this, what if that on their own. And then we roll it out, and then, we have a whole new set of questions after the rollout. So we have those initial questions just from playing around with it on our own. Then, Beth was great to come back and, answer those questions for us. And then we roll it out. And after the rollout, new questions emerge. So we come back and we had a second round of questions for Beth. So I don't know, Erin, if you wanted to add anything else.
No, I think that's about it. There's a team, Kim leads our team of 4 coaches, so we each take a little bit of a different view on things. One of us deals more with Google, so she's looking at how does it interact with Google, and somebody else does the single sign-on, and they're looking at how does it work with the single sign-on. So we all take a little bit of a different lens to it, I guess. And I think when you combine then all 4 lenses, you get a bunch of different questions that we just came to Beth with. So
Absolutely. And yeah, bringing all of those perspectives together, I think is so important. I find it interesting in your particular case, you're probably, because we've got, some new customers, watching this or people that are looking at Hāpara, and we've kind of got 2 different types of implementation now, one of which is, a group that just went potentially one-to-one and have never had a tool in place that allows them to monitor and see what kids are doing. And then others where maybe they're switching from another tool that had some similarities to it, but are making the shift for any number of reasons. So, did you guys already kind of have a culture in place for how to use that type of technology?
Yeah, they had a taste of it with the previous product that, they were using, but they weren't using it for very long before it was gone. So they only had, just enough to know that that's what they wanted. They saw enough to know that they wanted something like that in the classroom. And so I think that's part of the success is they were hungry for it. They were ready for it. It wasn't a tool that we had to force on them or try to sell. It just kind of sells itself. And since they had already seen what a tool like that could do, they were definitely eager to learn about it. So I think that's why we wanted to get the information to them too before, Christmas break, because we knew we would have so many teachers ready to just, want to start day 1 when they got back. So we didn't want them, you have those techie teachers that may not need that hand-holding as much at the beginning. So if they wanted to get started right away when they got back from break, although we knew we were going to be rolling out a training for each school, those teachers could go ahead and get their hands in it. And so they could come to that training with some questions like, I tried this or we tried that, and they came prepared to ask the coaches questions during their training.
And how did you guys do those? So talk to me a little bit about what that rollout training looked like, how it was organized, how you guys did it.
Well, each coach oversees 5 buildings. So it was, I had communicated with the principals about Hāpara, what it was, what we were doing. And I said, your coach is going to be reaching out to you to schedule a time for your building to, have a training. So that really just the coaches worked one-on-one with the principals to set those times up. Yep.
Great.
Erin, is there something else to that I'm missing?
No, that was pretty much it. I developed the training for the other coaches, and they just made a copy and tailored it to their schools. But I really just used all the resources that we got from Hāpara. And we did go through and make sure though that all of the coaches knew the pieces that we would not be using during remote learning, because that was important to make sure that our teachers did not use. There were 2 pieces that we just were not going to use during remote learning because it just isn't going to work correctly. So let's avoid that pitfall before it even starts. And thank you, Beth, for offering that information so we can avoid that. But aside from that, I think everything went very smoothly.
Yeah,
There
I
were
do
really-
remember that conversation.
Yes. There were actually 2 trainings, and Erin's referring to the one we just had. So we had the one in January when we got back from Christmas break, and that was the initial one. And then remote learning hit, and Beth informed us of some things we needed to be aware of for success using the tool remotely, and some things that we really wanted to make sure schools knew and were very aware of as far as student privacy and things like that, as far as what times we were going to have the tool on, and it was going to be a little bit different. So we had it this time to where we weren't going to actually turn the Hāpara on for their school until they had that training. So whereas when we initially rolled it out, we had it on. So if anybody, we had that 45-minute webinar we front loaded them with and some other tutorial videos. So if they wanted to go ahead and give it a try on their own, they could before their school was trained. But when we went remote, we made it more of a requirement to have that training one more time to just make sure they were informed of, what Beth had shared with us about what to be aware of when you're using it remotely.
Beth, what were a few of those things that you guys talked about? Because privacy right now, especially for a lot of school districts, is such an important conversation to be open about and to be having.
Yeah. And Erin and Kim, just remind me if I'm not remembering this correctly, because I have a lot, you can imagine, I've had a lot of conversations with schools over the last 6 months or so about privacy, but there are a lot of schools that are hesitant to use highlights during this time because we do have a very strongly worded policy about not monitoring students off the school network. But then in March, the world flipped upside down, and now the students' classrooms are wherever they happen to be. So we've really been supportive of districts as they've wanted to turn on highlights and let students or let teachers have that ability to monitor and support students while they're learning from home, just like they would if they were in a brick and mortar classroom. And I really think that was the gist of it. And there are some little things that can be adjusted, just some fine-tune adjustments made in the Hāpara admin console if student privacy is something that is a really big concern, especially if students are on their own devices, just some things that can be changed a little bit. But I don't know if we really want to get into those changes. People can email us. They can ask, what those questions are, I guess, if they want. But that was really what we talked most about. And we have what I think is an excellent parent letter that goes a long way in explaining what Hāpara is. It links to our privacy toolkit and just explains some of those questions that, of course, parents, of course, have the they're concerned about, what can our teachers see? Why do you want to have this visibility? And I think once they understand the intent behind highlights, it's a lot easier for them to swallow that pill of, oh, now I understand why the teacher wants that visibility. It's not to spy on the kids, it's to help them, if they get stuck on something, and to provide that support during the school day.
We get a lot of schools or districts that miss that step, the communication with with the parents, and I think what's the communication with the student about exactly why you've got the tool and what the purpose of the tool is. It's a really important step that it's especially for people watching and that sort of thing, that I think that Joliet, you guys did particularly well, which is that communication side of things.
Well, thank you. Our director was the one who fine-tuned the letter. I think Kim, you and John worked collaboratively on that. And again, just making sure that everybody knew exactly what the timeframes were, how they can tell whether they are or not being monitored, with the extension being colored or grayed out. So and sharing that with the students and with parents, just so you can by a glance even see whether it is or is not being monitored at that time.
We were joking before we jumped on the call that my niece-in-law is a student at Joliet, and same with my nephew, and told them that I was all excited. I was like, you guys are going to be your teachers are using Hāpara, and she looked at me and she's like, oh, that's you, and we laughed about it. But I asked her, I was like, well, why don't you like it? She goes, well, my tabs get closed. And I said, well, were you on task? And she goes, well, no. And I said, so what's the problem? She goes, I understand.
Yes.
You guys, it's just funny because she had said that her teacher did tell them ahead of time, like, we've got this tool, we can see what you guys are doing, stay on task. So
I know it's been particularly helpful for the teachers in our intermediate and junior high grades to make sure that those tabs are closed, but in our lower grades, just to help the kids get to where they need to be and pushing those websites to them and even seeing their screens so that they can help them navigate some, because before we weren't able to see what their screens, they're going, does your screen look like this? Is it gray or is it blue? Is it, and you couldn't tell to be able to help them navigate. So even just that kind of troubleshooting has been tremendously helpful for our teachers.
Yeah, and that's something that, because last year when we piloted it, it was only for grades 3 through 8. Now this year we've expanded it to K1, 2, and so that was the other reason for a training, to inform teachers, how the updates for remote, plus to make sure those K1, 2 teachers felt comfortable with it. And they've just kind of taken it and ran with it too. So they're really loving it.
Great. It becomes kind of their mission control to start class and let everyone be on the same page. That's great.
Yes.
Awesome. So you guys did your initial rollout, you piloted it with a smaller group, then you moved to a larger group. Then you did kind of your COVID rollout. What were, if you could go back in time, what would you have done maybe differently, for somebody who's new and looking at rolling Hāpara out?
I honestly, we didn't do too much of a smaller group, which typically when we do rollouts, it is more like one grade level or one school, 1 or 2 schools. I think just because of the fact that they were used to having that product and then it was taken away from them, we were kind of under the gun to get something to them by mid-year. So we did a whole 3-8 across the district-wide rollout, which, it's big and it opens us up for lots of, questions and things like that we need to be ready for. So ideally, I always ideally like to do a smaller rollout to start. But honestly, I think since everybody was so hungry for the tool, that it's part of why it went so well and it wasn't an issue. And the dream team that worked on it, they can handle all of that, and they work with their individual schools and very well, and we're able to navigate that. But I always think it's better to start smaller, just so you can control it a little bit more and potentially see what issues may come up. I don't know what else we would do differently.
It's not a software. The difference, I think, between the larger rollout this time and being larger than what we normally do, but the software isn't necessarily much that we need to do something with other than know what each piece does. Like, you can have it running and just look at screens, or you could be hopping into their Google Documents and giving students live feedback while you're working. So it depends really on how in depth they want to be with it. But it is just to have it and see what is monitoring. There's really nothing to it. So I think it's an easy one to actually roll out in a larger group.
I always get worried about, back end types of things that they can't see that, we're going to have an issue with something and it's going to be this huge, large scale district wide issue, but we didn't have anything like that. It's a pretty straightforward tool. So we didn't have any issues that I can remember.
And I will say probably more straightforward for us because we are a Google district. So if you're not a Google district, it might be maybe, I don't know, because we don't have that issue, but it might be a little bit more involved.
Right. And you guys use Google Classroom, right? With your, okay. And so now have you ventured out to take a look at Student Dashboard yet? Have any of your students started using that or not yet?
Not yet. We really are still focused on highlights because we had started last year with it, then everything fell apart, right? And so now we're finally kind of getting back to it here and haven't pushed much beyond highlights. We were looking at workspaces for a little while last year too to see if maybe we would do something with those, and we can see some potential there, especially with remote learning and how, you know, resources could be organized for students there. So we've been talking a little bit about that, but that's as far as we've gotten. So
excellent. Well, if you wait a little while longer, like 60 days, all of the workspaces are going to be aligned to Common Core and then the individual state curriculums. So it'll make rollout so much easier for you too. So that's some exciting. I always like to give little tidbits of information that I'm not supposed to on these webinars, you know, as motivation for people to watch them. So
Good to know. Yeah. So we'll wait then.
Yeah.
So 60 days, mark your calendar.
So Erin, you ran some of the PD sessions. Can you talk to me? What was the format? Was it an hour? Was it hands-on? Was it, you know, like how did you run the PD sessions?
We did about 45 minutes, I believe, for our junior highs because they'd had it before, so this was more of a refresh. But I had other devices. I was logged in as a student with other devices, so that I was sharing. It was mostly me sharing my screen and going through, you know, what each of the tabs does, and spending most of our time in highlights. And they could see that if I was a student on a wrong site, how I could close out that tab. So they were able to see the teacher side and the student side simultaneously. So I think them actually being able to see both sides was important. But aside from that, I set it up. The four of us, the four coaches did it together, and then we did it with our individual buildings, but mostly live.
That's pretty much how it ran, the initial training. So you're talking about the remote training, right, Erin?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the training we just had. And then we had the other one back in January of last year, and they did it in person. But same thing, they had some Chromebooks set up, if I recall right, and you had those logged in as students. And yeah, so it was very hands-on, so they could see both of those sides.
We still made a slideshow for them so that they had the resources on each page. So I took the resources from Beth and still put those small videos on how to on each slide so that they still had a resource to go back to, and we house that in our district drive. So everybody always has access to those resources when they need them.
A technical question here, which is interesting, and I think I know the answer, so I can do it if you guys don't. But Beth, I think that you know the answer to this too. With highlights, did you have control of the students' devices remotely, and how was that permission granted? So
we did not.
You guys have the ability to view the screens and that sort of thing remotely, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. But we don't control their screens.
Correct. Yeah. And so that's important, is like the teacher can't move the student's mouse or anything like that. They can just see what they're doing. And the way that it's pushed out is that at the district level, the district technology department downloads the Hāpara tool, and then it's automatically pushed out to the students' Google accounts as an extension. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Erin, coming back to, sorry, your training and that sort of thing too. Have any of your teachers taken part in the Champions program yet? Do you know, or?
Not that I know of. I think one of our coaches did, but I don't know of any of our teachers that have yet.
Okay.
Well, Can I jump in here real quick? I've been working with, a fairly decent sized district, and they don't have tech coaches, unfortunately, just due to budget cuts and some of those types of things. And they came up with a model, and I'm sure it's probably not unique to them, but it's one of the first people that's talked to me about the model that they're using. And what they're doing is they're having some teachers across their different buildings go through the Hāpara Champion program. Then they're leading a training, for a handful, 5 or 10 teachers at a time. So it can be very hands-on, very personalized for that group of teachers. Then one person in that group is taking the reins and they're going to lead another training. And it's just they're exponentially building that capacity for on-site experts in each building, which is so helpful. I mean, if you have a question, you want it answered immediately. You don't want to wait for maybe the one person out of, a district with 500 or 600 teachers, to be able to have that question answered, because it's going to take weeks. So it is nice to have that, a lot of expertise on site. So.
Now, another one that came through online, which is a great question, Erin or Kim, whoever can jump in. District, they really struggle with new teachers coming on board at the beginning of the school year for programs that they've already run out in the past, because there's kind of that initial training blitz. And then, a new teacher comes and the rest of the district already knows how to use it. So what do you guys, I mean, it doesn't even have to be Hāpara specific. How do you guys get new teachers up to speed with all of the tech tools that you guys have?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think, as Erin mentioned, we have that district drive that houses a lot of the resources, and they make a ton of videos along the way to themselves for instructional purposes to explain how to use certain tools. So those are always, there to be accessed. We do have a new teacher training at the beginning of the year, but it's nowhere near enough time to actually train them on the different products. So really, new teachers are just really highly encouraged to reach out to their tech coach, and for those programs they want to get up and running with right away. We make sure at that new teacher training to give them an overview of what all the programs are. I mean, obviously they can't learn them all at once, so they can kind of prioritize what they need to know more immediately, and then they work with their tech coach. And sometimes I know the coaches have pulled small groups of new teachers when it works out, at a PLC or something like that, and just work with them that way or individually. So do you have any other thoughts on that, Erin?
I think occasionally we'll rerun something. I did one, I think it was last year, for a program that we've had for so long and we just haven't rerun it. And so we opened it up to new teachers. But I think part of it too is new teachers being overwhelmed at the beginning of the school year, especially with technology and curriculum, and you're taking in all of these things and you don't know which one you're going to be using the most. So of course, get used to your SIS, because that's how you're going to be taking attendance and submitting grades. So that is key. Get used to your Google Drive, because that's how you're doing everything else with all of your, teams and things. But beyond that, I think Hāpara is one of those that they reach out to us very quickly, or Kim is very good about giving each of us a list of who our new teachers are in each building. So we then know who to reach out to, because with 5 buildings, we each have roughly 200 to 250 teachers. We don't always know all the new people at the beginning of the year. So Kim is very good about giving us a list of who the teachers are in those buildings, so we can go to them and say, have you tried Hāpara yet? Are you ready for it? So so we take that onus kind of on us as well. They don't necessarily know what to ask for when all these things are thrown at them. So we do use that frequently it's our responsibility then to check up on them.
Awesome. It's something from an ed tech company that we talk about all the time internally, which is we know that districts have this problem, which is new teachers, they don't necessarily know how to use everything. So as a company, we want to be really proactive and excited to help them, but you've got 40 different web applications that you're using too. So from a teacher standpoint, everyone trying to be helpful isn't helpful. So I know that that one of the big things this year is there already is in-app training, but I know this year for for first-time users, there's going to be a much deeper dive kind of in-app training the first time that they go in, or something that they can come back to that'll hopefully kind of show them the key little bits that they have to, learn on the tool to be successful.
Right.
Another person, they were asking if, and I believe that because you guys aren't using Workspace right now, so Beth, question for you on this one. Someone was asking, are you using this Hāpara to deliver your professional development? So can you talk a little bit about how school districts actually use Workspace to deliver professional development?
Well, one of the beautiful things about Workspace is it's one of the tools that teachers can actually be students in the workspace. So we encourage districts to set up a workspace to lead a professional development session through. So the topic doesn't matter. It could be over, anything from, CPR training that I think districts have to do every year to, it could be a tech tool, or it could be a workspace about workspace. But the idea is to add the teachers to that workspace so they can experience the workspace from the perspective of a student. Because again, like you alluded to in your trainings, you had the ability for teachers to see what was going on the devices that the students are on. And it's important for teachers really to have that comfort level so they know what they're asking their students to do. They want to have that experience, and using the workspaces for PD is a perfect way just to give teachers that that experience. So hopefully then they're like, oh, this is really not as difficult as we thought it was going to be, and this is a great way to get in there and just keep building those workspaces and segment those out so you can have multiple topics that are delivered through the year. And Robert, as you were asking about having a place for new teachers to go, that's workspaces are great places to build all that information about different tools that teachers might need and different software programs they might use. So that's a good place to house all of that as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think last I checked, there were a couple hundred shared professional development workspaces in the Discovery tab. So for the people watching, something, to kind of explore and look around and see what other people have put together, because it gives you a baseline for where to start, so you're not starting from scratch. Erin, another question that we had, and Kim as well, but specifically kind of when you're doing your training, one of the pieces that's really important to Hāpara that we connected with Joliet over is that the purpose of highlights is to be able to give teachers control, to be able to see what students are doing, to be able to lock them into certain websites. And we always have the fear that teachers are just going to sit there, closing tabs out, what we call whack-a-mole, trying to get, ESPN up closed. From an instructional side, how did you approach the conversation about how to use it as a teaching tool and not as like a punishment or a policing tool?
Well, we did have the conversation about making sure what tabs are open versus what tabs they're on, right? So I may have ESPN open and it's a tab that's there, but that's not what I'm on currently. That's not the screen I'm looking at. We did talk about messaging students. We talked about having private conversations with students, and nobody has time. I don't have time to sit and monitor, the 3 kids that are constantly doing, you're always on YouTube, or you're always on this, or you're always on that. Well, then I can put them into a guided session, right? I can just put them in a focus session or put them in a filter session. So we talked about those so that it doesn't take away from, if you have those repeat offenders, it just doesn't take away then your time from the other students because you're constantly monitoring those same kids, right? If you put them in that filtered session, it's not a problem anymore. So, but you have to give them the opportunity to learn from their mistakes initially. And if they just are insisting on doing the wrong thing, then filter them out of that. But definitely having that conversation about it being a learning moment for the student. They're not going to learn about, they're not going to learn if we don't first have that conversation with them and talk to them about it. So definitely have to take that time in our trainings for that discussion.
We were really excited this year. The marketing came out with, and with professional learning came out with this amazing deck of cards, which is like conversation starters for teachers to have about professional learning. That's going to find hers now, I bet. And we were excited because we were going to go to conferences and hand them out, and then COVID hit, so we got a lot of them waiting for the teachers out there in the Hāpara offices. But it's such an important conversation for teachers to have with students, because as you talk about, Erin, like, you got to give them a chance, and they're going to walk out of the classroom and go on their phone anyways. So
I have those right over here.
yeah.
But those are great cards, actually, to spark very good conversations. When I got those, I was looking at them, I'm like, we could have some really good discussions about some of these. But definitely great cards to spark discussions about privacy and just a lot of different things that are in there. Very good.
We were joking. I was joking that I'm gonna have those conversations with our office staff, because some of them, like, what does your online presence say about you and stuff? It's like, okay, well, we can have some of these conversations as adults too. I don't know if we want to, but.
Right.
That's great. So, I mean, you guys are probably looking at kind of a remote setup for a while now, for probably maybe until the end of the year. I don't know. I don't think Governor Pritzker's lifting anything anytime soon. How have you guys, is there anything that's gone really well for you guys? This isn't specific to Hāpara, but I like to ask all of the people that we talk to about how your teachers and students are connecting while they're gone. Because, we're finding more than anything when we talk to students that the thing that they miss the most is there's no teacher there to look at them and say, why are you having a bad day? So what have you guys done as a district or just individually to help those conversations and relationships?
Well, one thing that has shifted, and I think will continue even after we go back to regular life, hopefully one day soon, is that we always had monthly tech bites with our schools. And we called these tech bite meetings, where they were just where the coaches would come in and kind of give an overview, some hot topics of things that are going on right now, some great tools, so we were able to touch base with our individual schools that way. But we've shifted that this year to be more collaborative cross district and by grade level bands. So now we have K1, 2, tech bite meeting once a month. The coaches come up with, a topic, a theme for the conversation. They facilitate that conversation across that group of teachers. We have the K2 group, the 3-5, and then 6-8 ELA social studies teachers and 6-8 science math teachers. And so it's just a chance for teachers to share what's working, what frustrations are they having, did someone find a fix for something that, they could share. And still, so they have that conversation with all the meetings, but then also have kind of a focused topic that the coaches share and facilitate conversations around. So I see that continuing. That'll be the new format that our tech bites are going to take even after, because it's really, you're kind of isolated in your own building, and now even more than ever, you're isolated in your own home. So it really, really helps to have those conversations with teachers. As far as students, we did do, some things with Power of Code, where we kind of did some remote challenges for them, and got some excitement built around that. Erin, you're more in the classroom. I'm not sure what you're seeing maybe with what teachers are doing with students. Yeah.
Right, so we have our social workers reaching out to our teachers with tons of resources, tons of social emotional learning resources that they're using in class. For community building, we have some teachers that are doing either a Google form or a Pear Deck slide. So at the beginning, so when a student comes in, they need to take this Google form that counts as both their attendance, but it's also asking them, how are you feeling today? And it's just giving the teacher that sense of how a student is feeling at the beginning of that day. And maybe then during their asynchronous learning time, a teacher can pull them into a breakout room and have a discussion with them and see how they're doing. So I've seen that happening in some of our classrooms, some classrooms and a lot of schools. So a lot of those kinds of things, just kind of getting temperature checks for how kids are feeling, and then using some of that asynchronous time to touch base with individual students who might need that more individual attention.
That's great. And I've talked to a couple of school districts, and they're doing more grade level bands. And they said, we forgot how important it is for, grade 1 teachers to connect with other grade 1 teachers. And this kind of forced them back into that behavior. So that's really good to hear.
And as a team, we had created Google Communities in the past, but we're kind of going to revitalize them coming up this month at the end of the month. And when I pushed that message out there, one of my teachers came back and she said, oh, I was just asking Kim about this. I didn't know where to find it, because it's under Google Currents instead of Google Plus now. So she's been sharing left and right, constantly sharing resources for our pre-K teachers, because that's a big struggle for our pre-K teachers to be remote. So she's been sharing a lot. So I think that the grade band, our Google Communities are set up specific to grade level, but we have these conversations for grade bands. So I think that'll be great to be able to share resources across the district. We have 21 schools between pre-K through 8. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of great things that people are doing, but it's not curated in one space for them. So hopefully this will help them be able to share great things that are happening across the town.
That's awesome. Beth, a question for you. We talked about how, the rollout for Kim and Erin, which hard to believe was a year ago now. Hāpara moves fast. We like to develop new things, and I know that the resources for implementation have changed in the last year as well. So if there's some newer people watching this webinar, what are some of the resources that are available to them from Hāpara for their implementation and PD rollout?
Well, I would say one of the biggest changes really is the introduction of an engagement manager, because that position just came about maybe a month or so after your rollout. So I would say that the EMs, we're almost like an added resource. So we get to stand by and make sure that all of the steps that need to be taken by the different people on the team, that everybody's working together. So I always say I'm officially a cat herder. That's just what I'm going to start, calling myself. But I don't remember how many pieces of content we developed this year, but it was an incredible amount of content. And a lot of that, of course, was because, again, the world was flipped upside down in March, and we kind of had to fill that gap with how Hāpara could be used, when students were at home. So we have just an amazing amount of resources. One in particular I was thinking about as you were discussing highlights is we have this kind of guided PDF of, questions to address when you're talking about highlights with students, because, students really do, I think, sometimes see us as the enemy, but like your niece, she knows it's kind of a necessary part of the classroom, and it's not all bad. It really has to do with how the teacher is approaching it. And every school who's just starting to, who's just gone through setup and teachers are just on the cusp of starting to use Hāpara, that's the perfect opportunity to build that culture like you have at Joliet, where, you've set those expectations for, this is how really this tool should be used. So we definitely have resources to address so many of those concerns.
I was about to say, I think it was something like 200 pieces of content, but I'm sure our VP would correct me if I was wrong. And she sent a message, 197 to be precise. So yeah, there's lots of great tools out there. I think that more than anything, as I'm reflecting on the conversation that we've had today, you guys have amazing leadership, it seems like, from Kim and John and all throughout your district. It sounds like you guys have a very good coordinated leadership effort, and I think that goes a really long ways being successful.
Yes, we are very lucky to have the leaders that we have in place. I am very lucky to work for both Kim and John.
Right back at you.
It's amazing, where just having that culture in place, how big of a difference it makes when it comes to what seems like small and trivial things, like telling people that there's a new tool out there that they can use. So it's the way that you guys did it is it's why we were so excited to have you on this conversation, because it's it's what we hope it's the experience we hope all school districts can have, and there's many lessons from the way you guys did it that I think that people out there that are watching can benefit from.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. All right, well, I don't want to take up too much of your time because you guys are incredibly busy, I know, right now, because it's January and right after Christmas, and that's a fun time for all schools everywhere. So
Right.
I just wanted to take the time. Thank you guys for taking the time to sit down with Beth and I today. Beth, thanks for jumping on the call as well. What you guys were able to do is fantastic, and hopefully in 6-12 months from now we can have a follow-up conversation about this, and maybe you've looked at some other pieces of the tool like Workspace or something, and if there's other things that you're implementing, and we can talk about how that went as well. So hopefully I get to have you guys back at some point, and hopefully I haven't scared you off too much.
Not at all. Sounds great.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, perfect. Have a great one.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Bye,
us.
everybody.
Bye.